4.6 metric tons. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, the average gasoline car emits 4.6 metric tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere every year. Unfortunately, since they were introduced in the late 1800s, gasoline cars have dominated transportation, giving the consumer little choice but to use the non-renewable resource. But that does not need to be the case. In this speech, I'll be going over the devastating effects gasoline cars have had on our environment and convincing you to buy an electric car. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas released by the combustion of fossil fuels. As it enters the atmosphere, it becomes trapped and creates a blanket layer that retains heat and prevents the Earth from following its natural cooling cycle. We call this climate change, and the resulting consequences will be drastic and tragic changes in environmental conditions, weather patterns, and accessibility of food and water. Passenger vehicles, cars, motorcycles, buses, and taxis account for 45% of transportation emissions, surpassing the next largest group, freight vehicles, by over 15%. And unfortunately, I understand climate change is a controversial topic. But one thing that cannot be dismissed when looking at non-renewable resources is that, by definition, they are finite and will run out. In 2019, the Millennium Alliance for Humanity and the Biosphere warned that world oil reserves would run dry by 2052. Well, what's the alternative? If we go back to that first EPA source, they tell us by positing and answering another question. What are the tailpipe emissions on an electric vehicle? None. Quote, an EV will not emit tailpipe emissions, end quote. Instead, electric vehicles with hydrogen fuel cells will emit only water vapor. The only emissions that can be associated with electric vehicles are the emissions associated with the production of electricity. In the United States, electricity is by and large produced using non-renewable sources like gas and coal. But these statistics are changing. In 2021, 20% of all electricity production came from renewable resources, and that number is only going up. To put it simply, this means gas-powered cars are locked into an emissions load because of and based on the reliance to gas, while electric cars can vary in environmental impact depending on the source of electricity. But are electric cars accessible to the average person? Looking at prices for the latest Tesla model can be daunting. Not everyone has $100,000 to spend on a luxury car. But a Tesla is exactly that, a luxury car, and far from the only choice. Almost every major car brand now has an electric option on the market. The Nissan Leaf, the Chevrolet Bolt, and the Hyundai Kona are just a handful of lower-cost options. And yes, they are still more expensive than their gas counterpart, but those sticker prices don't take into account government incentives. On a federal level, new cars come with a tax credit. Using the Hyundai Kona as an example, that credit would be $7,500. Other incentives vary from state to state, but if you were to purchase that same Hyundai Kona here in Massachusetts, you would be looking at a $2,500 rebate. I'm not asking you to go out and buy a new car today, but according to the AARP, the average lifespan of a car is 12 years, meaning most of us will be looking for a new car within the next decade. What I'm asking you is that when you do start that search, consider how your choice may impact the world, and consider the increasing accessibility of an electric car. Unlike some of the other environmental issues we face today, Substantial change is in our hands regarding transportation emissions. The choice is ours. Thank you.